Okay, if you're that smart, Darius Whitmore growled, slamming the thick stack of contracts onto the counter. Then explain this. His words cut through the warm air of Oldtown Café like a knife. Conversations halted, forks froze in midair. Even the old jukebox in the corner seemed to hold its breath, the Motown melody suspended. But Maya Williams remained unfazed. She simply bent down to look at the pile of papers in front of her. These were no ordinary papers. This was the merger contract for the billion-dollar deal Darius was gambling on, something even the three most expensive lawyers in Atlanta couldn't make sense of. At just Shurgio. Maya stood as firm as a rock, her confidence outshining both the sharp navy suit and Darius's annoyed stare. Viferius Sorpsi, she wore a faded gray apron, faintly smelling of fries and coffee. But right now, in this cafe, she was far beyond the man who had built a billion-dollar tech empire. She wasn't just a waitress at Oldtown Café. She was about to teach him a lesson. Darius Whitmore, the self-made billionaire who took Whitmore Tech from a small startup in Boston to a global tech giant in Atlanta, was always 3 steps ahead, with cold, piercing blue eyes and a chiseled jaw. But tonight he wasn't in his shiny glass office. No, he sat at a chipped formica table in a dive cafe, facing a merger deal teetering on the edge. He needed a place to think, to regroup. Maya wasn't the first to bring him coffee that night. She barely noticed when she set the cup down. Her voice was light, but sharp. "Goen, you look like you're wrestling a bear," she said, smiling. Frau Bodentonery lied, noticing the furrowed brow and the red scribble on the clause about conditional termination due to market disruption. She saw the signs. He was stuck, entangled in a legal web he didn't know how to untangle. "Can I help?" she asked casually. Darius, still irritated, snapped back, "You wouldn't understand this contract." "I can," Maya replied, and that's when it all began. She remained calm, unwavering. "Is this the whole contract?" she asked, her voice steady, still nonchalant, though her eyes glinted with curiosity. Darius raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth curling. "Does it matter?" "Yes." Maya nodded. "Context changes everything." Without waiting for him to respond, she grabbed a notebook from the counter, flipping through the pages. Eberst, her eyes skimmed the text, sharp, devouring each word, each clause, her mind spinning, analyzing what others might miss. The cafe remained lively, the clink of cutlery, the murmur of conversation, but Maya felt like she was in another world. The cafe vanished, leaving only the contract, the words, and her mind entirely focused. "Well, be you awar at arp asar this clause," she said, pointing to a section with a pen. "It lets them back out if your stock drops more than 7% after the merger announcement." Darius blinked, focusing on her more intently. "Correct," he said, slightly impressed but still skeptical. Maya didn't look up, her voice certain. "It's vague on market disruption, too many loopholes for them to exploit." She paused, letting her words sink in. "And this?" She tapped the page, pointing to another clause. "The escrow of $1 million, no release conditions. That's not collaboration. That's leverage." Darius leaned forward, intrigued. "How do you know all this?" His tone was no longer mocking but genuinely curious. Maya paused for a moment, meeting his gaze, still calm. "I used to study this stuff, Emory, before my mom got sick, before I had to hustle to pay rent." Darius clenched his jaw, his gaze fixed on her, not just because of her sharpness, but also because of her steadiness. She wasn't lying. She knew exactly what she was talking about. "I'm surprised you're still in Atlanta," he said, his voice softer, contemplative. Maya didn't flinch. "And I'm surprised you walked in here thinking, 'No one's smarter than you.'" The words landed like a clean punch. Unexpected. The tables had turned instantly. The air between them shifted. Darius leaned back, no longer thinking about stock prices or contracts. He only saw the girl, no, the woman who had pointed out two deadly flaws in the contract that the best legal minds had missed. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice gentler now, genuinely curious. "Maya Williams," she replied without hesitation, her eyes still fixed on the papers. He nodded slowly, his mind racing. "Ever thought about doing something bigger with that sharp mind of yours?" "I have," Maya answered, wiping her hands on her apron. "But life doesn't always care about your plans." Silence lingered, heavy. Then Maya pushed the contract toward him, her eyes locked firmly on his. "Fix clause tied.he.copper, and add release conditions for the escrow. Make it outcome-based. Otherwise, they'll squeeze you when you're at your weakest." Darius looked at her, his jaw clenched, still processing her words. "You're serious," he muttered. Maya smirked. "I was serious before you insulted me. Now I'm just being generous." Darius sat still, his eyes fixed on Maya's notes on the contract. He sighed, leaned back in his chair, and his mind spun. "Would you like a cup of coffee?" he asked, his voice a little awkward, clearly unsure how to continue the conversation that had taken an unexpected turn. Maya glanced at his cold coffee. "You've already ordered," she replied flatly, not sarcastic, just that the moment had passed. "More orders." Offering coffee was now just a formality. She turned and walked towards the kitchen, her step steady but somehow lighter. The air around her had changed. She was no longer just a server. She had left her mark. Darius watched her walk away, then turned back to the pile of paperwork. "Whoa, OCB Wust." For the first time in weeks, the words on the page no longer felt like thick fog. Maya's notes were sharp, clear, like a knife cutting through the tangled company jargon. She hadn't just solved the problem, she had made him see what he had missed. He stared at the contract, his mind still reeling from what she had pointed out. Rot. She had done what his top legal team had failed to do. She found a loophole that could collapse the entire deal without breaking a sweat. Then it hit him. The most important meeting of his life hadn't taken place in a luxurious conference room. It had happened right here in this humble cafe, in front of a sure-year-old server who dared to challenge him and turned his world upside down. The next morning, Darius still tossed and turned in his luxurious penthouse, staring at the ceiling, Bajas Ahal, the city lights casting fragmented shadows on the wall. So well far the wall. For as Maya Williams. He couldn't stop thinking about Maya Williams. There was something about her, not just because she had exposed the weakness in the contract. It was the way she did it, fearless and unwavering. He had expected her to be intimidated, to back down in the face of his authority. Fawn, but Maya did not do that. She confronted him head-on, and she won. By morning, he ordered his legal team to review clause and the escrow mechanism. By afternoon, the results came back. Maya was completely right. The terms were vague, deliberately convoluted, leaving too many loopholes for the partner. Worse, they had overlooked the entirely one-sided escrow condition. In the bright glass-walled conference room, among suits and tech elites, Darius drifted back to the cafe, to the chipped formica table, the cheap coffee, and the sure-year-old server talking about the billion-dollar contract as if she were just adjusting a shopping list. By Wednesday, he was back in front of Oldtown Café. The lunch hour buzzed with the clatter of plates and lively chatter. He hesitated before stepping in. He hated the feeling of uncertainty, but that's exactly how he felt now. As he entered, a few glances turned his way, not because they recognized him, but because his shiny suit felt completely out of place. Persisa, Maya spotted him immediately, carrying a tray of drinks, easily weaving between the tables. Her hair was tied back loosely. Her apron was more relaxed, and her old, worn sneakers were worlds apart from the polished shoes of his associates. She glanced at him, not hostile, just acknowledging. "Back for eggs?" she asked as he approached the counter. "No," Darius replied, his voice faltering slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Back because of you." Maya set the tray down, slightly tilting her head. "I'm working. Make it quick." "Thank you," Darius said, his tone still a bit sharp but sincere. "You saved me from disaster. Millions of dollars at least." "Uh-huh." Maya blinked slowly. "Are you sure you want people to see you thanking a server?" Darius sat down at the counter, leaning in. "The thing is," he said quietly, "I don't think you're just a server." Maya crossed her arms, tilting her head to study him. "So, what do you think I am?" "Someone who understands the system," Darius answered confidently. "Someone who sees through the language. Someone who, if given the chance, could outsmart every young associate in my company." Maya stared at him, unblinking, her face unreadable. "So what? Are you going to hire me?" Darius hesitated, his hand sliding along the edge of the counter. "Not exactly. I'm inviting you to talk." "After work, just to talk." Maya studied him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "Lipton, I'm off work then. If you're serious, just wait." "I'm serious," he said, his voice softer. 1-to-1. "Then we'll see," she replied, walking away, leaving the echo of her words behind. At Lippin, Oldtown Café was completely quiet. The usual clatter had died down, and the older men near the jukebox had gone home. It was section. Only the faint sound of the dishwasher from the back remained. Like a peaceful rhythm, Maya stepped out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, her apron removed, her hair loose, her face calm. She moved with a quiet confidence, completely different from the server behind the counter this morning. So her first sopping, she sat across from Darius, on the old bench, under the flickering neon lights. The feeling was strange. Just a few days ago they had been arguing here, and now they were sitting together, as if the whole world had shifted. "You really are persistent," Maya said, her tone light but with a hint of probing. She was testing him, seeing whether this was avoidance or if he was genuinely serious, as he had said. "I'm curious," Darius replied, his voice steady but with a slight change. "Curious how someone like you ends up here." He gestured around the booth, the cafe, the worn chairs, and the familiar scent of coffee and grease. "Not at court," Maya retorted. "Not behind a desk in D.C., but here at this counter." She took a deep breath, her gaze softening, settling more comfortably. Her story was simple, but not easy. "Easy. Life doesn't follow a script, Mr. Whitmore," she said quietly. "I had a plan. Study law at Emory, full scholarship, top mock trial champion. Then my mother's kidneys failed. Dialysis 3 times a week. Medicaid didn't cover it. My younger brother started getting into fights at school. Bills piled up." She paused, her voice still even, with no trace of self-pity. "School had to wait." There was no bitterness in her words, only acceptance of the reality she had overcome. "I still self-taught," she added. "Law journals, law blogs, anything I could get my hands on. I even started coding. I'm working on an app for legal knowledge for teens. Interactive contracts, simple translation tools, things like that. But who's going to respect a server who didn't finish college?" Darius looked at her. his expression softening. For the first time tonight, he wasn't looking at her as a transaction. Hugh, he thought about her story, about who she was. I would, he said, without hesitation, his voice almost a confession. I would respect you. Maya raised an eyebrow, her lips curving slightly. You're the one who called me sweetheart and told me to keep pouring the coffee, right? Darius winced, recalling his earlier arrogance. He had been rude, had looked down on her. I deserved that, he said, looking down at his hands. But I'm not stupid, he continued, meeting her gaze. I've built my career by spotting ideas before they explode. I recognize talent. And Maya, what I saw that night, it wasn't ordinary talent. It was excellence. Maya looked down, her fingers grazing the edge of the table, reflecting on his words. Silence lingered before she spoke, her voice gentler. I'm not asking for charity. I'm not offering charity, Darius replied. I'm proposing a partnership. I want to help you build your app, resources, developers, funding. You lead. I support. Maya didn't respond immediately. She studied him, her thoughts swirling. She had heard offers like this before. They sounded too good to be true, often just ways to control her. But Darius's eyes were different. There was no manipulation, just a quiet promise. Finally, she spoke. I want to do it my way. Darius nodded slowly, absorbing her words. I understand, he said softly. I respect that. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full of understanding, as if the two of them had realized they were on the same wavelength, though the next step wasn't clear yet. Wal for Sabwasar Rabrin to Erwa. After a moment, Maya broke the silence. Wosawan, I'm not going to sit idly by while you handle everything, she said, her voice firm again. But I'll listen, Darius smiled. That's enough. Brian Awal. The next morning, Darius returned to the conference room, facing his legal team. Everything was the same. Lawyers, financial advisors, the company's elite, discussing the merger. But his mind wasn't there. He was thinking about the conversation with Maya the night before, the way she dissected the contract, how she understood the legal world, beyond just reading the fine print. Maya had the ability to see through layers of jargon, understand the system, and expose weaknesses no one else saw. He hadn't just met a server. He had met someone who would change the world, but he knew he wasn't the only one who saw her potential. About that morning, his phone was flooded with messages from the company. Pice Hour asking about Maya, questioning why she was involved in the contract. By afternoon, he stared at the screen full of data and projections, which no longer held any meaning. He couldn't stop thinking about Maya's words, her sharpness, her confidence, and how she had confronted him. He knew the deal was risky, but now it was even riskier, not just financially. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind for Darius. Every time he walked into the office, his mind stayed on that bench in the cafe, across from Maya. Her sharpness, focus, and quiet confidence haunted him. She didn't just challenge his business acumen, she also challenged the very idea of who could make a difference in a deal like this. Darius couldn't shake the feeling that Maya was more than just a smart girl who helped him fix a contract. She was something more, something he couldn't quite define, but clearly very important. On Wednesday afternoon, he found himself standing in front of Oldtown Café again, the weight of the past few days pressing down on him. The cafe was already bustling, despite it being early, with the sounds of clinking cups and lively conversation. As he stepped in, the familiar noise of the cafe seemed to soften. A few people turned to look, not because they recognized him, but because his polished suit stood out against the worn benches and old jukebox. Maya spotted him immediately. Her sharp eyes, as if she had already predicted he would return. This time, she didn't ask about eggs. She just looked at him quietly, as if to ask, "Now what?" "I need to talk," Darius said, his tone direct but no longer cold. "About your app, Foxer." Maya nodded, but didn't respond right away. She grabbed a cloth to wipe the counter, her eyes not meeting his, clearly waiting for him to continue. "I think it's time to be serious. Really serious," he said, his voice softer, carrying weight. "I've told my team. I want to help you build this. Resources, developers, legal support. You lead, I support." Maya stopped wiping and turned to look at him. She stayed silent, but her posture shifted, as if she was listening carefully. "I'm not asking you to give up control," he said quickly, sensing her hesitation. "I want you to take it to the next level. We can make it something big." "What?" For the first time, Maya seemed to relax. Her shoulders dropped, and she leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, not arrogantly, but with a calm thoughtfulness. "Why?" she asked, her voice firm but tinged with doubt. "Why do you care?" Darius looked her straight in the eye, more sincere than ever. "Because what you have, Maya, it's not just an app. It's not just a product. It's something real, something that can change people's lives." Maya stared at him for a long moment, her eyes searching, as if trying to find his true motivation. Finally, she spoke. "All right, I'll listen, but I'm not making any decisions yet." She smiled wryly. "So, I've had enough headaches with this app without adding company drama." Darius nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. "Fair enough." A few weeks later, things exploded beyond expectations. Darius dove into the project with Maya, bringing along a team of lawyers, developers, and designers, all backing an idea that had once seemed like an impossible dream. They called the app Lawbridge, an app designed to help people understand the law, using accessible language, and focusing on empowering those who had been left behind by the legal system. For Maya, the transition from being a server to leading a startup wasn't easy, but it felt natural. She had the mind, the determination, and the heart to make it happen. With Darius's support, she finally had the resources to bring her vision to life. But each step forward came with its challenges. The necessary legal checks were slow and painstaking. As Lawbridge began to gain attention, the corporate world took notice. For investors, competitors, and even local officials began to grow curious. Success was never easy, but each obstacle taught Maya more about the system she had always fought against. One evening, after a long day of coding and brainstorming sessions, Maya returned to Oldtown Café, sitting alone at the back booth. She wasn't there to work. She just needed a quiet moment, a break from the chaos of the office and the tech world she had unexpectedly stepped into. It was in this cafe where she first met Darius. And here, too, she was finding herself again. Though everything had changed. Stirring her cup of coffee, she thought back to that night. The contract, the moment when everything shifted. Now, Maya wasn't just the girl who pointed out a flaw in a contract. She was building something that could change the world. Something that would make the law accessible to everyone, just those with money. Missing the old days? A voice interrupted her thoughts. Maya looked up to see Darius standing in front of her, his suit still sharp, but his smile relaxed. Relaxed. "Just thinking," she replied, a smile tugging at her lips, "about how everything's changed." Darius sat down across from her, looking more comfortable than ever. "Changed? Huh? I hope it's for the better." Maya shrugged, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "I think so, but I think we're headed in the right direction." For the first time in a long time, Darius felt at peace. This wasn't about mergers or billion-dollar deals. It was about something bigger, the opportunity to do something meaningful, to help those who needed it most. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Soul Wind, Darius and Maya worked relentlessly, pushing forward the development of Lawbridge. Amidst the complexities of corporate strategy and tangled legal procedures, the team at Whitmore Tech had wholeheartedly embraced Maya's vision. But as everything accelerated, so did the pressure. Maya could feel the weight of expectations settling heavily on her shoulders. Her idea had become something far greater than just a project. It was now a movement, and everyone was watching. Lawbridge wasn't merely an app, it was a lifeline for those who had never had access to affordable legal resources. Every line of code, every decision felt important. Every obstacle, ranging from technical issues to resistance from the company, had to be confronted head-on. But Maya was used to fighting through life, and this was no different. The person listened one evening after a long meeting with investors who still didn't fully grasp her vision. Maya found herself standing outside the Whitmore Tech building, looking up at the sleek glass facade. The city lights twinkled below her, casting a soft glow on the world around. She needed a break, something to reset her mind, and she knew exactly where to go. As she stepped into Oldtown Café, the familiar hum of the diner wrapped around her like a warm embrace. The neon sign flickered above, and the smell of coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air. A few regulars sat at the bar, laughing and telling stories. This was a place where nothing ever really changed. And that was exactly what Maya needed. She slid into a booth by the window, ordering a coffee and a side of hash browns. As she waited, her mind raced with everything that had happened. Over the past few months, Lawbridge was gaining traction, but with the attention came increased scrutiny. For us, people wanted to know how someone without a degree, without traditional credentials, could create something that was now making waves. In the tech world, Maya wasn't bothered by the skepticism. She had faced worse, but there was a part of her that had always felt like an outsider, like she didn't truly belong in the rooms she now found herself in. It was a feeling that was hard to shake, even though she had proven time and again that she was more than capable. A soft cough broke her thoughts. Maya looked up to see Darius, standing at the end of her booth, his usual sharp suit replaced with a more casual outfit, dark jeans, and a jacket. He had clearly come straight from work, but there was an ease to his presence that made Maya smile, despite herself. "You're here?" Maya raised an eyebrow, surprised. She didn't think Darius Whitmore would show up at Oldtown Café. "I was wondering where you disappeared to after the meeting," Darius said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Thought I'd see if you wanted some company." "You look like you could use a break." Maya tilted her head, studying him for a moment. "And you're offering yourself as a break?" she asked, her voice light but tinged with amusement. Darius gave a small, self-aware smile. "Guess I am, but if you're not interested, I can always go back to my glass tower." She let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "I'm just surprised to see you here, that's all." "I'm full of surprises," Darius replied with a wink. "And I figured if anyone would understand the importance of taking a step back every now and then, it'd be you." Maya leaned back, crossing her arms as she looked at him. "How's everything going at the office?" Darius sighed, rubbing his temple. "Busy, The usual. Investors want results, but I keep feeling like I'm missing something. Lately, I've been so focused on the numbers that I've lost sight of the bigger picture. Maya nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. It's easy to get caught up in the grind, especially when everything's moving so fast. But you can't lose sight of what really matters. He met her gaze, his expression softening.
That's exactly it.
I've been thinking about what you said. About the app, about the people it's meant to help. You're right, Maya. It's bigger than a product. It's a movement. She smiled at him, her eyes bright with a mix of pride and quiet gratitude. I'm glad you're starting to get it. Flicked. Just then, the waitress brought over their food, setting down a plate of eggs and hash browns in front of Darius and a steaming cup of coffee in front of Maya. The diner was quiet, the background hum of conversation slowly filling the space as more customers filtered in. But for a moment, everything felt still. Darius picked up his fork, breaking the silence with a thoughtful question. So, what's next for you? For the app? Maya leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she considered his question. Well, the school pilot is going well. We've gotten more feedback than expected. The next step is scaling up, getting it into more schools, more communities. The big challenge now is making sure it's accessible to the people who need it most. I'm in, Darius said, his voice resolute. Whatever it takes. We're backing you all the way. Maya looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of doubt or hesitation. But all she saw was determination, the same drive that had built Whitmore Tech into the powerhouse it was today. You really think I can pull it off? She asked, her voice softer than before, almost vulnerable. I know you can, Darius replied without missing a beat. And I'm not going to let anyone get in your way. Maya didn't respond right away. Instead, she sat back in her seat, her mind turning over the possibilities. She had never imagined this path for herself. She never expected to be sitting in a booth in a diner with Darius Whitmore talking about scaling a legal literacy app that had the potential to change the way people understood their rights. But here she was, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like she was on the right path, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told they weren't worthy of a seat at the table. Maya glanced down at her coffee cup, feeling the weight of the moment settle around her. Pot Kyle. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had been overlooked, ignored, or pushed aside. And with Darius by her side, she knew she wasn't alone. All right, let's get to work, she said, her voice steady. It's time to take this thing to the next. The following days flew by in a whirlwind. Maya and Darius poured all their energy into Lawbridge. The app was gaining more and more traction from the community, its potential growing with each passing hour. But success came with pressure from all sides: investors, the board, and even competitors eyeing Maya's innovation. Darius, who had always prided himself on being 3 steps ahead in the business world, the business word, now had to adapt to a new rhythm. For adapt or sepult. Partial. He had built Whitmore Tech with numbers and strategy, but Lawbridge was about people, real people who needed access to the law, people whom the system had always turned its back on. And Maya was the one leading the charge. He watched as she threw herself into her work with relentless determination, holding meetings with developers, legal experts, and community leaders to ensure the app was perfect. She had the vision, and nothing was going to stop her. One evening, in Whitmore Tech's creative lab, Maya sat hunched over her laptop, surrounded by piles of notes, code snippets, and an untouched cup of coffee. Darius walked in, hesitating slightly. The lab had been buzzing all day, but when he arrived, the atmosphere seemed to shift, making space for her intense focus. Maya didn't look up immediately. She typed rapidly, scrolling through lines of code. Only when she stretched and leaned back did she notice Darius standing in the doorway. "Hey," she said, her voice light but tinged with exhaustion. "What's up?" "Just wanted to check if you're all right," Darius replied, stepping into the room. "You've been here all day. Take a break." Maya smiled faintly, rubbing her eyes. "I'm fine. Just trying to finish this." "We're almost there, Darius. I can feel it." Darius leaned against the table, studying her with understanding. "I know, I can feel it too. But don't burn yourself out. We can't build something sustainable if you're running on empty." She paused, considering his words. "I'm fine," she said, her voice more confident. "I've been running on empty my whole life. It's nothing new." Darius shook his head, his brow furrowed. "That's not the point, Maya. You have something special here. You can't pour all your energy into it without saving some for yourself. You deserve to take a breath." Maya didn't respond immediately, her eyes back on the screen, skimming over the code. She understood what he was saying, but she didn't know how to stop. She had never slowed down, never taken a break. Her life had been about survival, and now, with Lawbridge about to take off, stopping wasn't an option. But after a moment, she stopped, meeting his gaze. "You're right. It's just, when something is this important, I don't want to waste any time." "I understand," he said softly, moving closer to the table and sitting across from her. "But it's not just about work. There's your health, too. You need to take care of yourself." Maya leaned back, sighing. "I'm not used to that. Taking care of myself. I mean, I've never had anyone do that for me." Darius looked at her, his expression serious. "I care about you, Maya. I'm not just a partner. I'm your friend. And friends take care of each other." Maya's heart fluttered. She wasn't sure when their relationship had shifted, from business partners to something deeper, harder to define. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Darius smiled gently. "Don't mention it. Now, how about you take a break? Let's go grab dinner. You pick the place." Maya chuckled softly, shaking her head. "You're persistent. But all right. I'll take a break." They left the lab, and for a moment, the pressure from the outside world seemed to ease. Maya had been so focused on the bigger picture that she had forgotten to take care of herself, but with Darius by her side, it felt a little easier to breathe. In the elevator, the doors closed with a soft chime. As they reached the lobby, Maya felt a sense of gratitude, from the girl flipping burgers to pay her rent. She was now leading a movement that was changing lives. This elevator ride felt different, calmer, like a new beginning. The next morning, Maya met with the team, discussing the upcoming launch. They had gathered feedback from the pilot test, refined the interface, and were ready to scale. Things were moving faster than expected, and Lawbridge was about to make its mark. But even with the excitement, Maya still felt something was off. The investors wanted results, numbers to prove everything. But Maya knew the story couldn't be told with data alone. The impact of Lawbridge couldn't be measured by profits or stock prices. It was measured by the lives it touched, by those who finally had the tools to face the unjust system. Looking around the conference table, Maya felt a swell of pride. This team wasn't just a group of colleagues. They were teammates on a mission. Together, they were ready. "All right, everyone," Maya said, her voice strong, echoing across the room. "We've got work to do, but we're doing something meaningful. Let's keep our eyes on the goal." The team nodded, the atmosphere charged with energy. They were ready. Ready. The pressure was unrelenting. Lawbridge was expanding rapidly, attracting attention from all sides. With the launch date approaching, everything had become a tangled mess. Investors demanded results. The board kept requesting updates, and the media began to notice what Maya and Darius were building. What had started as a simple app was now a movement, reshaping the way millions of people access the law. Maya could feel the weight of it all. She spent her days in meetings, fine-tuning features, ensuring a smooth user experience, and consulting with legal experts to ensure the content was accurate. It was no longer just about writing code. It was about making sure Lawbridge created a real impact. Every detail had to be perfect, but perfection was hard to achieve, and the more she worked, the more exhausted she became. There were moments of doubt when she questioned if she could keep going, but each time that thought crept in, she pushed it aside. She couldn't let it win theirs. Not when everything was hanging by a thread. One afternoon, as she sat alone in her office, surrounded by walls covered in notes and reminders, Darius walked in. His usual confidence was now mixed with a hint of tension. His eyes serious. "Maya," he said softly, "can we talk for a minute?" She looked up, surprised by the tone in his voice. "Of course. What's going on?" Darius pulled a chair up to the desk, sitting across from her without waiting for an invitation. "I've heard a few things from the board. From the investors." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She knew the pressure was high, but hearing it directly from Darius made it feel even heavier. "What are they saying?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, though anxiety was creeping in. "They're getting impatient," Darius said, his gaze intense. "They want more numbers, more proof that this is going to work. They want profits, and frankly, they're doubting whether Lawbridge can scale the way we promised." Maya's stomach tightened. She knew the investors were worried, but hearing it so plainly from Darius was a stark reminder of the pressure they were under. "I told them we need time," Darius continued, his voice softer. "We're building something big, but they don't want to hear it. They're focused on profits, not the long-term impact. Honestly, they don't understand why this is important." Maya took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. Fark. She knew the business side would be difficult, but now it was clear that the real battle wasn't just about creating the product. It was about convincing people who had never been in her shoes why it was worth fighting for. "I've been thinking about this," Darius said, his voice thoughtful. "Maybe we need to make a hard choice. Maybe we need to push back, remind them why we started this in the first place." Maya looked at him, her mind racing. She understood what he meant. He was suggesting standing up to the company's pressure, refusing to let the numbers dictate their path. She thought for a moment. Standing up to the investors, doing what was right instead of what was expected, was terrifying. But then she thought of the people who would benefit from Lawbridge, the people who couldn't afford to fight in traditional courts, the families, the individuals, the ones who needed this to survive. "I'm not backing down," Maya said, her voice firm. "We can't let them force us to sacrifice our vision for a quick win. This app isn't just a product, it's a movement. I won't let them turn it into something that only serves their interests." Darius nodded, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "I knew you'd say that. That's why I'm here." "You're not alone." Maya felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had come so far, and now, with Darius by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The following days were filled with tense meetings and difficult conversations. The investors pushed harder, demanding quick results, and the board grew increasingly restless. But Maya didn't waver. She was building Lawbridge for a reason, and no one was going to take that away from her. Darius, with his strategic mind, quietly shielded Maya from the worst of the pressure. He stood behind her, ensuring that the corporate world didn't suffocate her spirit. Together they faced every challenge, refusing to let the doubters steer them off course. Finally, the launch day arrived. The Whitmore tech team was buzzing with excitement, and Maya could feel the tension in the air. This was the moment they had all worked so hard for. The app was ready to launch, and the world was about to see what they had created. Maya stood in front of the screen in the conference room, her heart pounding. Darius stood beside her, quietly observing as the final preparations were made. "Are you ready?" he asked softly, his voice reassuring. Maya nodded, her hand slightly trembling. "I think so." Sake. The conference room was filled with directors, developers, and a few invited investors, all waiting in anticipation. The atmosphere was charged, but Maya remained focused. She wasn't worried. She wasn't afraid. She had already won. No matter what came next, the countdown began, and Maya's eyes locked onto the screen. The Lawbridge logo appeared, followed by the familiar interface, ready to reach thousands, maybe even millions of people. Then, with a single click, the app officially launched. The room erupted in applause, but Maya couldn't hear it. She was focused solely on the possibilities, on the impact that was about to unfold. Lawbridge had just launched, and the response was overwhelming. The server crashed under the weight of thousands of users rushing to try the app. Within hours, thousands signed up, eager to access legal support in a way that had never been available before. The success exceeded expectations, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenge was only just beginning. The media exploded. Articles, posts on X, and analysis flooded the airwaves. The world was paying attention. What is pastry? Some called Maya a pioneer, but others questioned how a girl without a law degree could create something hailed as groundbreaking. Regardless of what they said, one thing was clear. Lawbridge had the potential to change how legal services were approached. The next morning, Maya returned to the Whitmore Tech conference room. The excitement from the launch still lingered, but new challenges had already arrived. The investors demanded data, analysis, and forecasts for the next quarter. They wanted to know how fast Lawbridge could scale and what the profit margins would look like. Darius had warned her about this. The excitement from the launch would soon be replaced by the harsh reality of numbers. But Maya wasn't ready to compromise. Not yet, for Morgal. She sat at the head of the table, her posture confident, her gaze resolute. Hers approached. The investors were gathered around, their eyes filled with expectation. Darius was by her side, his quiet presence a steadying support. "All right," Maya began, her voice steady. "I know what everyone wants. The numbers, the forecasts, the growth potential of Lawbridge. I'll show you, but I want to make one thing clear. We will not sacrifice our mission for profit." The investors exchanged looks, some surprised by her straightforwardness. But Maya didn't flinch. She had been in the shadows of the corporate world too long to be pushed around. This app, she continued, was built to change lives for the people who have been overlooked, forgotten by a system that should have been serving them. That's why we're doing this, not to make a quick buck, but for something bigger than that. Darius looked at her, the corners of his mouth turning up in a rare smile. Maya was speaking her truth, and it was powerful. I understand the need for financial growth, Maya said, her tone measured. But if we sacrifice our mission for short-term goals, we are harming the very people we intend to help. I won't let that happen. The room fell silent. The investors pondered her words, but Maya stood her ground. She wouldn't back down. Not with so many people relying on her. Finally, one of the investors, an older man in a sharp suit, spoke up. I respect your passion, Maya, but in the end, this is a business. Businesses need to grow. They need to prove their value to the market. How do you plan to balance that with the mission you've committed to? Maya paused, letting the question sink in. She didn't have all the answers. She was still learning every day, but there was one thing she was certain of. We will grow, but we will do it our way, she said, her voice unwavering. We will scale, but we'll stay true to our mission. We'll find the right partners, the right resources, the right strategy. But we will not compromise on what matters. Darius leaned in slightly, his voice low but supportive. Maya's right. This is a long-term play. If we focus on building something sustainable, the growth will come. But we can't take shortcuts to win quickly. The room was quiet as the investors thought it over. Then the older man nodded slowly. I understand. Honestly, I didn't expect this level of commitment from you. Maya smiled faintly. I don't have time for half measures, not with something this important. The meeting wrapped up shortly after, but the weight of the conversation still lingered. Maya knew she had made her stance clear, and she wasn't backing down. The road ahead would be tough, but she was ready. A few days later, Maya faced a new challenge, another round of interviews with potential investors, but this time the pressure was higher. Lawbridge was no longer just an idea, it was a reality, drawing attention from both the tech and legal worlds. When she entered the conference room, unfamiliar faces, powerful directors, and legal experts looked at her with curiosity mixed with skepticism. They were there to assess Lawbridge's potential, to decide if it was worth a larger investment. Darius was still by her side, silently supportive. But this time, Maya felt the weight of the moment more than ever. She was about to present to some of the most powerful people in the room, and she wasn't sure how they would react. Would they see the value in her vision, or would they dismiss her as just another small entrepreneur? Maya took a deep breath and stepped forward. As the presentation began, she spoke with calm confidence, outlining Lawbridge's mission, its potential to help underserved communities, and its long-term impact on the legal system. She didn't shy away from tough questions. When they asked about scalability, she answered honestly. When pressed about competition, she acknowledged the challenge, but emphasized that Lawbridge was different because it was about people, not just profit. And when they asked about her credentials, Maya didn't hesitate. I may not have a law degree or a fancy resume, she said, but I've lived this. I've seen people struggle with contracts they don't understand, with a legal system that seems designed to push them out. That's why I built this app, to give them the tools to understand their rights. The room fell silent. Maya wasn't sure whether they were impressed or just thinking about her words. But after a moment, one of the investors spoke. "You presented very convincingly," he said, nodding thoughtfully. "We're interested. Let's talk next steps." Maya's heart raced. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the turning point. Lawbridge was no longer a dream. It was a reality. The meeting stretched on for another hour, full of debates over forecasts, timelines, and expansion. But when it ended, Maya felt like she had achieved more than just securing an investment. She had proven something to herself. She had walked into that room uncertain, worried about how they would receive her. But in the end, she showed them who she was, how parter, and that Lawbridge was not just an app. It was a movement. As the investors left, exchanging glances and whispers, Darius stayed behind, looking her straight in the eye. He didn't need to say anything. His gaze said it all. They had done it. This was a pivotal moment. "Well?" Maya asked, breaking the silence. Darius smiled, his usual calm replaced by a genuine sense of excitement. "I think we've got a solid partner, Maya," she smiled back, the weight of the day lifting. It wasn't over, but this was the beginning of something big. From the days of flipping sandwiches to pay rent and teaching herself the law, now she was leading an initiative that was changing how justice was accessed. The days that followed were filled with paperwork, negotiations, and the whirlwind of work. Maya knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it never had been. Every step, every obstacle was worth it because Lawbridge was becoming a tool of empowerment, not just for the rich, but for everyone who needed it. Darius was always by her side, offering advice and support when needed, but mostly letting her lead. He was proud, not just because she was building something that could reshape the legal landscape, but because she remained true to herself. She didn't compromise on her mission. And now, with the backing of major investors, she had the resources to do more. As Lawbridge expanded, Maya became even more involved with the community. She visited schools, teaching students about their legal rights, showing them how to understand contracts, helping them realize the power of knowledge. Power, the app wasn't just a tool, it was a movement to elevate legal literacy, helping people understand their rights and take control of their futures. Borg. One evening at Langston Prep School, as she spoke about legal rights and the importance of contracts, Maya felt a deep sense of pride. From a two-year-old server, unsure of where life would take her, to now standing in front of children, showing them how to break free from the chains of ignorance. After her talk, a young girl at the back of the room raised her hand. "Did you really make this?" she asked, her voice full of awe. Maya nodded, smiling softly. "Yes, I did. And if I can do it, so can you." Later, a few students came up to her, asking questions and thanking her for the app. Maya's heart swelled as she realized that Lawbridge was changing lives. These kids, who might never have known their rights, now had the tools to face the world. That night, Darius called. His voice was different, softer, more contemplative. "You know, Maya," he said, "I never thought I'd see the day you'd change the world. You've done something amazing. I just want to say I'm proud of you." Maya's heart tightened. "Thank you, Darius. But it's not just for me. This is for the people who have been overlooked, forgotten. This app, this movement, it's for them. I'm just helping it happen." There was a pause. Then Darius spoke gently. "You've created something that will last, and I'll always be here, supporting you every step of the way." Maya smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. She wasn't just building an app, She was building a legacy of empowerment, equality, and justice for all. Months later, Lawbridge was in RCT states, being used by schools, libraries, and community centers to teach legal education. Maya's efforts were recognized, not just in the tech world, but also in the political sphere. She had become a voice for those left behind by the traditional legal system, advocating for digital legal education and ensuring that no one was left in the dark about their rights. At a national conference, standing before a crowd of legal experts, tech innovators, and policymakers, Maya thought back to the moment she slid that thick stack of contracts across the counter to Darius Whitmore. It felt like a lifetime ago. Even though only a few years had passed, her journey had come full circle. From the serving girl to a leader in the tech world, Maya had proven that anything was possible if you never gave up on believing. As the crowd applauded, Maya took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the room. She didn't need the applause, didn't need the accolades. She just needed to keep moving forward, fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. As she stepped off the stage, a feeling of peace washed over her. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Maya Williams's story, the serving girl who created a revolution in legal access, was far from over. But one thing was certain. She had changed the world. And she wasn't stopping. The journey of Lawbridge continued,